It's time for the Voice of Reason podcast. Here are your hosts, Sean Phillips, Andy Van Beber, and Travis Kuykendall.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andy Van Beber. Welcome to the Voice of Reason podcast. That's right. Rub your eyes really, really hard. Look over to my left, and you will see to my right actually, a very handsome man, Travis Kuykendall. The return is complete. He is here for one night only, but man, we're glad to have you, buddy. How are you doing?
I am doing really good. Yes, it is only one night. I'll come back on some.
Yeah,
I'll come back on some shows. But as far as it being a full-time thing
brother,
weekly, I can't do it anymore. But
it is good. It is good to have you back. Tell the folks how you've been, what's been going on, all that good stuff.
I have been great. Like I said, I've been a dad now for over a year. Thomas is 13 months now, and it's been awesome. We love every second of it. Love being a dad. And everything's been good. Everyone's happy and healthy, and working and
still climbing the towers and surviving, and all that fun stuff.
Still climbing the towers in this lovely weather.
God, I don't even want to begin to fathom what that, because you guys are probably I'd say 5 to 10 degrees colder than we are, and then you're up there in the flatlands, and so you got the wind whipping, and
oh yeah, you get the wind up here. It's funny. I'll post videos once in a while, like real quick, just showing everybody what's up, and it might look cool and stuff, but people don't see the days when it's like you're literally just sitting there for 6 hours, not moving because you're trying to troubleshoot a radio, but you have to be there and do what the text says, and people don't see that, and I'm telling you, it fucking sucks. But
nope, that's a whole bunch of nope right there.
But it's a good trade. It's taking care of me, and I enjoy what I do. So
definitely. Sean is not with us tonight. He's been doing the recruiting life. I think being the recruiter, being on the road, between that and sickness and everything else, and
so we're going. Youngest was sick.
Yeah, and so I think he's been dealing with sickness. He's had, say good thoughts, prayers for his little daughter. She's been having all the good fun baby stuff, and so not to throw too much of his business out there, but just say good things for him. And if you're wondering what's behind me, this was a request of Travis. This was I can kind of get back out of the way here. Was that the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia? Is that who that is?
That was and they're like some orb that they got their hand on, and like they're posing for a picture, and they all have their hand on this orb.
And then
someone photoshopped Saruman from Lord of the Rings into it, and it fits perfect.
You're just like, holy cow! So you when you messaged in the group chat this week, you're like, man, I'd realize like, oh, that's in.
I think it just fits the ridiculousness of it all, and
so
I don't know. I love that picture.
For everybody who saw the previews for tonight and all the ads for tonight, we're going to be talking about the tariff and what effect that's going to have. But before we dive into that, I mean, Travis, you've been away and everything, and just kind of want to get your feel for the room, see what kind of headspace you're in about. You and I kind of talked about before we came on recording tonight. What's your headspace about the whole election, how things came out, how decisive the win was? Just kind of fill us in with where you're at and what you think about all this.
Yeah, we talked before. I'm not surprised Trump won. I didn't expect him to win as much as he did.
Yeah.
But I'm not surprised that he won. It's been really interesting to see who he's been picking in this administration to be on his team. I'm really interested in paying a lot of attention to the whole Elon and Vivek Department of Government Efficiency and what that looks like. Honestly, pretty skeptical. The tariffs, which we're going to talk about tonight, A lot of unknowns, just a lot of unknowns, and I'm not particularly very optimistic. Um, that being said, the alternative Kamala, was not optimistic about her either.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. It was just, in my opinion, it was just a really shitty election year. But hey, man, America voted. That's who it is.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
What did you attribute, in your opinion, what did you attribute what was Kamala's or the Democrats' biggest screw up, or what contributed to this whole thing? In your mind, what did you think contributed to all the biggest mess that we had going on with her losing?
Her losing, I mean, that that Jon Stewart special that he did on it, I think was pretty good. How like they were kind of they kind of lost, what they were stood for as a party.
Yeah.
It seemed like, because I didn't really know. Like, I knew what Trump was running on. I really didn't know what Kamala was running on. Like, I really
Right.
didn't know like what direction they were trying to go, or it was really just unclear. I saw some of the things she was proposing, but even then, I didn't have as good of an idea what she was trying to do as opposed to Trump. But also the way they marketed themselves. I mean, Trump was on all these big podcasts. He was on Rogan.
That
He was on Sean Ryan's show.
that was
Andrew Schultz interviewed him. Theo Vaughn, Lex Friedman.
Yeah, he did. When I read, so there was an article that came out back in it was in early October that, of course, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch is a liberal rag anyway, but one of the things that it pointed out was how he appealed to younger male voters, because that demographic is, I mean, they don't go, and I'm talking guys younger than you. So I mean, like,
Oh yeah,
these are
I was
guys.
surprised by that.
These are guys who are going to podcast. Like you mentioned Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan has the highest watched, the highest viewed podcast.
And I want to add his endorsement alone,
huge,
right before that was huge.
yeah,
That was huge.
and I
But keep going.
yeah, how he just reached those guys. I think he wanted to make sure that he had all the bases covered. And, I think Kamala thought that she had the African American vote tied up, which she did not, because there was a large community that was saying, look, if you feel that I heard many African American leaders who were saying, if you feel that Donald Trump, if you feel like the Democrats are wanting to bring bring your more equality to a realization, you're living a pipe dream, and that's just one of the things that was just one of many things. And just she just did not doing interviews. I think.
I mean, to be fair, she did some. I know she was on.
Yeah.
There's a really big podcast called Call Her Daddy that she went on.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, I didn't hear it, but it seemed like it wasn't very impressive.
Well,
and I didn't really think. I'll be honest, I wasn't really impressed by Trump's interviews either.
No,
but
she didn't. She missed out when she turned down that Joe Rogan interview. She missed out big time.
She should have done it.
She should have done it. She should have done it, and she missed out. She missed out big time, and I think that was it was a combination between her not wanting. I mean, Joe's like, we're going to do it here in Austin. That's where they're in Austin. He's in Austin, right? Is that where he's at? Austin, Texas?
He's in Austin, yeah.
He's like, we'll do it here in Austin. And she's like, no, I can't, my schedule and blah, 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 and all this stuff. And I thought, man, she's just really.
A lot of those people tried to get her on.
Yeah.
Theo tried to get an interview with her. I'm sure Lex Friedman tried.
I think Lex Friedman, that would have been that would have probably been the less biased interview that she could have done. Was that one with Lex Friedman?
Lex would have been the most, yeah.
Yeah, and
she definitely missed it there.
Yeah. So, but yeah, if I've watched a lot of, Jon Stewart is my go-to guy because he's the closest thing I think to a libertarian commentator there is, because he's not really sold on the Democrats and he's not really sold on the Republicans. And you and I are more. I mean, Sean is more centric, and he's more towards he's got a little bit more of a conservative lean, whereas you and I more moderate. And I was really hoping Sean could make it tonight, but I understand he has all the stuff he had going on. But I've made statements in my classroom. Of course, you know me, and I've pissed off a lot of my right wing students, and they're conservative. I'm just like, okay, I'll tell you one thing I did say the day after the election, and I said, Trump only won by a little bit over 3.5 million votes. And it seems like when Joe won by over 7 million votes. I said,
well, there was also
I was like,
a record number of, yeah.
Yeah. And I said, you know what? I said, one thing the Democrats aren't doing today? They're not calling for voter fraud. How amazing is that? And they was like, and they were really, I really pissed them off when I said that. And I was like,
well, I don't know if you saw the election night, Trump would put out a tweet or something on True Social, like massive fraud in Pennsylvania and all this stuff.
Yeah,
he won, and it was completely baseless.
But he was ready. He was ready to ride that train. He was ready to ride that train. If it didn't happen, he was ready to go back on that. But I'm with you, and we've had guests on. We had one of my Republican buddies from over around Springfield who goes on. There are people who and I'm going to allow them to have. Not that I allow or anything, but I respect their opinion. If they believe that there was some tampering in the election, okay, you're entitled to your opinion, and I'm not going to think any less of you for that. But it is what it is. So moving forward now, I think that I'm kind of curious as to what Tim, his vice president. Why'd I go blank? Vance. Why?
JD Vance.
JD Vance, not Tim. Jim or JD Vance. I think he's definitely more of a yes man than what Mike Pence was. But
yeah, I do too. And what I think I texted you guys this too. I didn't realize that was the same JD Vance that wrote Hillbilly Elegy.
Yes, yep.
I did not know, and then I to put the two together, like holy shit! Which great book, by the way.
Yes, it is. It
resonates with me and so many people from our culture. Like, he nailed it.
I've just read excerpts.
I didn't put that connection together until recently. And I think Trump was. I will say, like, I've listened to that guy's podcast that he's been on. He's very personable. He speaks very well.
Yes.
He seems like an average Joe, honestly.
Yeah.
He seems like a guy I can relate to. I'm one of you. He really resonates that.
You read his background. He's salt of the earth guy. So I don't really have a problem with JD Vance.
I think he sold out.
I do too.
But 100%.
But out of all the people that Trump could have went with, I think this was
a smart choice.
It was a smart choice. It was a safe choice. When you looked at him and Tim Walz, him and JD Vance did their debate. First of all, that was a breath of fresh air to me that those guys had a civil debate. But JD Vance just came off looking a lot better than Tim Walz did, because Tim Walz you could tell he wasn't well prepared. He kind of just fumbled through things, and but I will
say I saw way more negative things of Tim Walz online and social media, especially. Yeah. I saw almost no negative things of JD Vance.
But looking ahead, technically you do have to look ahead to 2028.
And I think Trump was doing that with his pick of JD Vance.
Yeah.
Younger guy, appeals to the younger generation. I think
he's not a fossil.
Him thinking ahead. Yeah, thinking ahead.
Right. And I thought it's going to be but he'll be like just about every other vice president. He'll kind of, once the administration gets going, he'll fade off into obscurity until it's time to him to, if he has to heck, there for a while you never saw Kamala at anything, and then out of
she disappeared, and then all of a sudden she's going for president.
Yeah, and that was that was the other thing too. I think that there were, and I had this discussion. You know, Miss Amanda Henderson. She's a friend of mine, coworker, and she's had a hard time the last 8 years voting because she's a Democrat, but she's like, man, she said, I'm going to vote for Kamala just so I don't have to vote for Trump. But she's like, it's like I have to hold my nose and vote, for her, and just like, and she's just like,
there's just been terrible candidates.
yeah, and I mean, there were just, we could go on and on about that, but I was like I said, I was pleasantly surprised. There wasn't, I mean, the fact that in the 2020 election, I went to bed and we kind of knew the way it was going, but we weren't sure. And then after midnight, then all they start counting the absentee ballots and things started going south for Trump. And oh my goodness. And it was what it was. But this year it was just like, I was just looking at, and I that night I was watching. I had 3 different screens going. I watched Amazon actually did a thing. They had a news coverage which Brian Williams had a panel. Brian Williams, who used to be with NBC, had a panel of like 13 different people on his panel in studio, and it was pretty cool. And it was laid back. It was relaxed. It was I
didn't know he did that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it was really cool. He did that. I had what I have. I had CNN. I had 4 screens. I had CNN. I had Fox, and then I had on my phone. It wasn't a live, but it was Axios, which is they kind of, I don't know, they're one of the AP networks or whatever, and so and Axios was the one who was calling it pretty much straight down the line, and so was Amazon. But when I'm looking up and I see that CNN is projecting harder numbers than what Fox was, I was like, this is going to be over quick. And I was really surprised on how, I mean, the folks at CNN were pretty much conceding before the night was even over.
Yeah. It was pretty obvious going at that point that, he was going to win it.
So one of these issues that the main thing that we're going to be looking at tonight is this whole thing about the tariff and campaign promise that Donald Trump made, 25% tax on goods from Mexico and Canada. And in reaction to basically, and this is a quote from Trump. When he announced his tariff plan, he said he alleged that thousands of people are pouring through Mexico and Canada, bringing crime and drugs at levels never seen before. And he said, on January 20th, as one of my first executive orders, I will sign all necessary documents to charge Mexico and Canada a 25% tariff on all products coming into the United States and its ridiculous open borders. And he also announced imposing an additional 10% tariff on goods from China. So, and again, this is about, he was talking about, where was it? I had another thing here about the problem with fentanyl. There was what was it on the Mexican, hold on a second. I had a thing about this, but there was about the amount of fentanyl that was coming in from fentanyl arrests that were made on the Canadian border was obviously a lot less than what it was on the Mexican border. But on the Mexican border, I think that's the problem. And again, you and I, before the podcast tonight, we were talking about how the reaction of both presidents of Canada, Trudeau is trying to stick his nose so far up Trump's butt, it's not even funny.
Yeah.
And I think that it's laughable that, when you saw Trudeau come to Mar-a-Lago, what was that, 2 weeks ago? He was at Mar-a-Lago 2 weeks. It would be 2 weeks ago.
I wasn't aware he went.
Yeah, he went to Mar-a-Lago, and he knows, and he knows that this is going to be a big deal. But before we go, what's your initial? Let's hear some of what your initial thoughts are about this coming out of the gate.
The tariffs. I mean, when I first heard it, it sounded like I mean, he made the statement. I mean, when he first heard it on a podcast, he made the statement, like tariffs my favorite word in the dictionary, and he explained. I forget what president he referenced who used tariffs as a big part of his economic policy and how they did the government back in I think it was like the early 1900s. But he referenced this guy, and he basically saying how Trump claims that these tariffs, his argument was that, well, they say that people opposing this plan say that consumers aren't going to pay for this. The consumers aren't going to pay for this. The countries that were putting the tariffs on, they're the ones paying for this. I'm a little skeptical about these tariffs. I get the argument of putting a tariff on imported goods brings jobs back to America. I get that. I guess we should explain. Let's just look up the definition of a tariff first.
Well, I can give a tariff is basically it's a protective tax that goes against imports to make American products look more appealing. And
right.
The problem with a tariff, though, is it's an indirect tax. Trump is trying to make this look like it's a direct tax on Canada, on Mexico.
Yes, and that's where the dilemma is, in my opinion. So
that's misleading because, go ahead, what were you going to say?
So I want to read this definition here to get it a little more direct, and I'm going to explain a situation. A tariff is a tax on imported goods. Despite what the president said, it is almost always paid directly by the importer, the company, never by the exporting country. So let's give an example. Say, for instance, let's say Chevrolet. I think they have a factory in Mexico. Chevrolet has a vehicle that's built in Mexico, say the Chevy Trax, and they sell it in the United States, but it's built in Mexico, right? If they do a 25% tax on that product getting shipped from Mexico to U.S., do you think that Chevrolet is going to pay that tax out of pocket and not compensate for it for the price of the vehicle? Absolutely not. There's a large corporation that has shareholders they have to answer to, and they have to generate profits to make their shareholders happy.
Right.
So inevitably, there's two ways. Either one, they raise the price, or, okay, they do move it into America. Now what you have to consider is, okay, if you're taking a product that's built from Mexico and now you're moving it into America, you have to take into account labor costs now. So yes, now Chevrolet doesn't have to pay a 25% tariff, but now they have to compare, okay, how much more are we paying in labor cost? And I don't know those numbers, but I can tell you right now, a UAW worker working in a Chevrolet factory in the United States is going to cost significantly more than a worker in some factory in Mexico.
Well, and one other thing that they're not really bringing, because a lot of that, so you say it's not where the thing I read on Brookings Institute. Brookings Institute is, if you've not looked, they're great research. But one of the things that they said, since you brought this up, it is an across the board tariff. Okay. The 25% I'll just read this direct from Brookings. They say the 25% tariff on Mexico and Canada will be much more extensive than current tariffs. It will basically, he said, or was it at first? It would approximately cause, first of all, it would cause the average American grocery bill to go up between $2,000 and $4,000 a year.
I saw that statistic too, yeah.
And what they're not taking into consideration is when this stuff from Mexico comes across the border, like you're talking Chevrolet trucks, it comes across the border, and we're they're shipping, and it's not even a full, because part of it's made here and part of it's made there, so and on some of these materials we're paying for materials to build our products. So it's kind of a misnomer. People don't understand this, but the thing that people aren't getting, like you said, Chevrolet is not going to eat that.
No,
they're not.
Absolutely not.
They're not going to eat that. They're not going to eat that.
No large corporation is
No.
going to eat that price. They're
I
just
mean,
not.
basically what you're saying is the same thing, that it's the same idea that when the Democrats said, well, when we raise minimum wage, big corporate America is just going to have to, in order to keep prices down, they need to just not raise their prices. People miss.
Good luck.
Yeah, well, and both Republicans and Democrats are missing the boat and what the idea of capitalism is. You're not going to, yes, you need to make the electorate happy. But at the same time, you're going to have to worry about the people who are funding your campaigns, which are these large corporations. So if you're going to impose a tariff on Mexico or Canada, this 25% tariff that you're going to impose on them, they're not going to eat that. They're going to pass that on the consumer. So when you think about what an average mid-size sedan, $45,000, $50,000, right? If you
not even that. If you look at, not to cut you off, but like U.S. U.S. automakers specifically don't even make cars sedans anymore because there's more profits in small SUVs.
Yeah,
it's not even about what the consumer wants. It's about, again, it goes back
what
to
they
the
make
profits.
money on.
Yeah, there's a reason Chevrolet doesn't make a car anymore.
Yeah, because it's not.
Same with Ford.
Yeah, one of the other things that I found that was really interesting is what we get. I don't think people really realize what all we get from Canada. A large portion of our lumber comes from Canada. Mm-hmm. And you more than anybody else would understand this. Since all the stuff has happened in Venezuela, Venezuela used to be one of our biggest oil partners. Up until 20 years? When did he come in? 20 years?
Whenever Chavez came in.
What was it?
I don't know what year.
That's been.
It was about
25 years ago. 20 years ago.
Roughly. I don't know what year he came into power, but.
And so everybody's like, well, Canada is where we get a large percentage of our oil from. Okay, and you can say all you want to. Oh, Joe's been raising the gas price. If you think the gas prices if this tariff goes through, it will definitely pass on to us.
Yeah, oil companies are not going to take that hit.
No,
you're out of your mind if you think oil companies of all industries are going to take that hit.
I was looking. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you got it. Go ahead.
I want to clarify something when I was talking about that Chevrolet example of labor cost. We hear all the time of buy American, and I get it. I'm all for it too. I'm all for products being made here. I am all for jobs being made here or getting created here. I'm all for people making a good working wage to build stuff here in America. But don't sit here and tell me that costs are going to go down and the economy is going to get better. Yes, there's going to create jobs. People are going to spend money. But don't tell me that the cost of goods are going to be cheaper because of this. Because now we're paying for higher wages and higher labor for these materials to make these things. We're paying, I make the example about you're paying a UAW union worker to work on these cars as opposed to some guy in Mexico getting underpaid, which, look, yeah. I'm pro-union. I don't have an issue with that. I will pay premium for that. I don't care. But you have to understand the consequences of what that is. Things will get more expensive.
Yeah. One of the things that was brought up on another article I read, Texas is poised to suffer the most from these imposed tariffs. And I found this very interesting.
That is interesting.
Greg Abbott's office, Governor Greg Abbott, according to their office, Texas and Mexico traded a total of $272.3 billion in 2023, and Mexico accounted for $142.7 billion in importing to Texas. Mexico has been Texas's top trading partner for the last 16 years. Top imports from Mexico to Texas include, get this, nuclear reactors and related parts, electric machinery parts, and also TV equipment, vehicles, and vehicle parts. And the Mexican said, and along that same line, the Mexican Secretary of their Economy recently said, if this tariff is imposed, like you said, this is that the average truck that is imported from Mexico would increase by $3,000 on average. Okay.
Yeah.
So the other thing that you have to bring into consideration too is how it's going to affect the supply chain. And this is something else I don't think we're really figuring through, because with the integration of supply chains with Mexico, I think Texas would see the biggest impact from that tariff. And
100%. Yeah.
And think about all the jobs that are tied in with that. You go down to Galveston, Corpus Christi, Brownsville, all those areas down there where all those ports are at and all the entry ports are at down through there. I think I read a statistic somewhere. 370,000. It would affect about 370,000 jobs. Okay.
See it.
And what they're saying overall with this, and this was another interesting fact that I saw. Some analysts are saying that the U.S. economy would lose about $250 billion in annual gross GDP and gross domestic product, and maybe close to 1.97 million jobs. So if you impose these tariffs, okay, there's so much more that I think has to be looked at. And I also want to go back to this original, because I was looking at what Donald Trump was saying about where
you made a good point. Like, and you can get into it, but like, this is a very complex issue. This isn't just throw the Band-Aid on, it's going to fix anything. Like, because I think I mentioned before that we were talking about Trump on these podcasts and how I wasn't really impressed. Like, he touted the tariff like it's some like fucking magic trick, like he's pulling a bunny out of a hat. And it's not that simple. That's a bold claim to make, that it's going to solve all these issues and it's going to be some magic fix for our problems. I agree with what you're saying. I think it's more complex. Please continue with that.
Well, okay, so I'll go ahead and just go into this right now. Historically speaking, okay, so you have to remember when income tax first came in. Woodrow Wilson, 1916, 1915, somewhere in there, introduced the idea. Of course, corporate America at that time, of course, you had the Rockefellers and you had the Carnegies and all these people who were vehemently against income tax because they knew that they were going to be in trouble. But he proposed this idea he floated the idea out there that if we collect an income tax, we can lower tariffs, and by lowering tariffs, we will promote American trade around the world. And he was right. And he said from income tax alone would make up for anything, if not double what we would have got through tariffs. And he was right. And we saw that with the passage of the 16th Amendment. With the passage of the 16th Amendment, we get an income tax, and we see our revenues just shoot through the roof. Okay? Now, much to the displeasure of the wealthy in this country, but it provided what we needed. Okay, so then fast forward to when we had our next Republican president. Our next Republican president then after Woodrow Wilson would be Hoover. Okay, let's see. Am I right? No. Harding, Coolidge, and then Hoover. Okay, so we have an about face then with Harding. Harding is, okay, let's protect American business. Coolidge actually said the business of America is business. And so he was about protecting American business. And that became the Republican standard then. Okay, we need to promote American business, American consumers. And after the boys came home from World War I, buying. Stock market you start seeing the Dow just start shooting through the roof at that time, which was like we get happy with 35,000, 36,000 points. Back then it was like 350, 400 points,
And then what happened?
Yeah, but so then what happens, So then Hoover wants to push the envelope a little bit more. So he pushes for this, what's called the Hawley-Smoot tariff. Now, the Hawley-Smoot tariff was the largest increase in tariff history. Okay, because when you look at September 1929, when things start leveling off, okay, well, what we need to do in order to protect American businesses, we're going to raise this tariff. We're going to raise this tariff so we can protect American business. And what people don't realize, and we've seen this time and time and time and time again, if we're not buying goods from other countries aren't buying from us, period. And we're already seeing what the effect of having a tariff with China is doing to us. We've been having this tariff war with China now for going on, 4 years? And our relationship with China is pretty much in the toilet. Okay.
Weren't we under a trade war under Trump's first administration?
Yes,
too?
at the tail end of Trump's administration, because it was over steel. He wanted the Chinese to buy more U.S. made steel, and he imposed, I forgot what it was. I want to say it was a 15% tariff on China at the time. It was either 10 or 15% tariff increase on Chinese goods. Okay, and the effect that had, okay, well, we're not gonna, and so it really put a strain on our diplomatic relations. It put our strain just in a lot of different areas, and doing this all in the name of, it goes back to this whole new and I call it ultra nationalism. We haven't
That's a
seen
good term for it.
We haven't seen a nationalist like Trump in a long time. I mean, a long time. I mean, Cold War times. America first, America always, America at the forefront. And America at all costs, may she always be in the right and may she never be in the wrong kind of mentality. That's a great patriotic line that you can put out there. But you also have to remember that we're in the 21st century where, global economics, global relations, geopolitical relations are much.
Well, it's a totally different environment than it was 100 years ago, 50 years ago, whatever the example. I mean, it's a totally different, complex problem.
So now here's the other thing. And this is something else that I've done and we're actually talking about this. We just have been talking about this in my government class this last week. Can Donald Trump enact tariffs without Congress? So if you go to Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, that's where there's I want to say there's 18 clauses there in Article 1, Section 8 that list out all of Congress's power. There's 27 different powers that are listed in those 18 clauses. And one of those is the power to regulate commerce. Okay? So the power to regulate commerce is the right to regulate trade. And that was something that Congress wanted to put, our framers, after the whole clusterfudge that was the Articles of Confederation, where the colonies were not, they were placing tariffs on each other, tariffing the crap out of goods going between the states. And then you had states who were making individual deals with other countries, and countries were pitting states off of each other to have these trade wars. Okay?
It was a disaster.
Yeah, and it was a disaster. So when the framers wrote the Constitution, they gave those powers to Congress. They specifically, I think it's out of those 18 clauses, I think trade was either Clause 4 or Clause 5 in Article 1, Section 8. Okay? And so you could see that it was towards the top of the list. They wanted to make sure that trade was going to be paramount. Trade was going to be at the top of the list. Okay? Now we go to this whole thing of saying, all right, can President Trump, because he's saying, I'm going to sign an executive order. Okay. So I, again, did some research. And so there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are 5 different trade laws that allows the president to bypass Congress and enact tariffs. Okay, so just some off the. I'll just read just a few of these here. 1962 Trade Expansion Act, which lets the president impose tariffs if national security is threatened. Okay, this is what I know that. By the way, this is what Trump used on the steel and aluminum tariffs that he used on China before. Okay, so it would be, to me, it would be a stretch to claim that all imports are a threat to U.S. national security. That's a stretch. Okay. The 1974 Trade Act, which allows tariffs when the president determines that a foreign country is unjustifiable and burdens or restricts U.S. commerce. Now, this also was used on other tariffs that we've done on China. This is where Joe Biden has he furthered Trump's tariffs on China. Okay, so that was through that. And it would be most common if he does more to China, it'll be through this 1974 Trade Act. The 1930 Tariff Act, which hasn't been used in forever, but it could allow the president to place up to a 50% tariff on foreign goods if the United States International Trade Commission, which is filled by people appointed by the president, finds that foreign country has used unfair trade practices against the United States. Okay.
I could see that one being used.
I could definitely see that one. Okay. There was another section of the 1974 Trade Act which allows the president to add a 15% tariff on imports for 150 days, given large and serious deficits in the U.S. balance of payments with other nations. So, trade deficit. The last one that they really mentioned here was the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which allows tariffs on all imports during war or emergency. Declaring such an emergency would require only an executive order from Trump. Okay? And according to the research I did, it said Trump threatened to use this authority in 2019 against Mexico, citing illegal immigration in the United States, but later that year, the two countries came to an agreement on immigration policy that headed off its use. Okay? So I see him. These are the 5 options that he could do. The one that I see, like I said, the most is the U.S. International Trade Commission. Again, all with Trump appointees, so he could get them to say yes, there's a trade issue. And the claims that he had, I thought were, I was looking for a stat earlier about the whole fentanyl thing, and so last year, 2023, at the Canadian border, 43 pounds of fentanyl was seized at the Canadian border. 43 pounds. Now, Mexican border, 21,100 pounds. Okay. So,
pretty big difference.
When I weigh all this out and I look at what I want to know what the end game is, because I don't think Trump, he's threatening the executive order because even though it's a Republican controlled House and a Republican controlled Senate, I don't think he has, because he doesn't have the numbers that he would necessarily need to get this to pass, because even though they're Republicans, there are a lot of rhinos in there. There still are a lot of rhinos in the House and in the Senate who are not full on 100% Trumpites. Okay. They're not all going to march goose step in line in policy with Trump's policy.
Yeah.
And so I think,
make no mistake, the Republican Party is not in unity as far as...
No. And I think the time... Trump doesn't have anything to lose. He has nothing. Trump has nothing to lose at all, because... and he'll do the presidential thing all the way up until the end in 2028, because he doesn't have to run for re-election. So he doesn't have to worry about what political implications this is going to have on his future, because he doesn't have a future. His future is for 4 more years, and that's it.
True.
Come January 20th, 2029, if he's still alive, that he will be, he'll go back to being Joe Common Citizen, and that'll be it. And so in the meantime, he's going to be doing all of these things, devil may care, on how
That's
it's
a good
going.
point. I didn't consider that, the fact that, yeah, I mean, he's got 4 years, and then he doesn't have
Yeah,
to
and I
sell himself again.
and I
He's
don't,
done.
but he doesn't care about anybody but himself. He he's gonna, I think he will care about a legacy. I think there is part of
No
the
president
man.
doesn't.
Yeah, I and I'm not going to be full on defending the man, but at the same time, I think that he does have a genuine concern for the country. He wants to make the country a better place,
I
but he
do
also
too.
wants to line his pockets, his buddies' pockets, everybody.
I agree with that.
I am really concerned about is, like I said, our economic future, our diplomatic future. I told I told my students on a different front, totally unrelated. Well, it is related, but Trump said during his campaign, when I get into office, I can end the war with Ukraine and Russia in 4 days, 5 days.
He
I,
originally said one day.
yeah, I honest to goodness want to see that happen. I honest to goodness want to see that happen. And I'm trying. So I met a guy, and I want to try to have this guy on our show. I met this guy. I have his daughter in youth group. This guy is first generation Ukrainian immigrant. He came here back in like '95, right after the fall of the Soviet Union and everything. He came here as a teenager. And so now he's, middle-aged dude, and he talks about, he said, there is a lot about this Ukrainian-Russian thing that people just do not know. And
I'm sure.
and he's like, and he hopes for the right reasons. He said there are atrocities that have been done on both sides, and he's like, you want to see a peaceful end to this, but it's, I want to have him on just for the fact that he's very intriguing and he has this conspiracy theory side to him, and I think he would be really neat to have on the podcast because we would have never have even had anybody remotely close to this dude. I'm just going to let him come on and just talk because this guy, I talked for him like 30 minutes at church last week, and I was just like, whoa, this guy has got to come on the podcast. So, but I hope. And I'll say this, I said this 4 years ago. I said this when Trump first came to office the first time. And I forgot who it was. I honestly think it might have, to sound totally honest, I think it was Ice Cube who said this, of all people. He's like, do I like Trump? Yeah, he's not my favorite person. But wanting Trump to fail is like wanting the pilot of your airplane to crash. You don't.
It's true.
You don't.
It's
You
true.
don't want. You don't want your airplane to crash. You don't want your country to fail. And so if we really want to fix the the division problems that we have in this country, man, get behind and I say a prayer for our country. I'll say a prayer for our country. I don't want to see our country fail. I want to see our country move ahead. I do want to see great things happen. But if Trump tries to, be somebody who's like OCD and try to fix everything in one day, it's going to make a bigger mess than what it already is. And that's what I'm afraid of. That's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how this plays out. That would be such a big move, the 25% thing alone. I really don't know if it's just a big bluff, a big talking point to make a point. If he actually follows through, because again, we discussed some of it. I mean, it's a very complex issue with a lot of reactions to it. Like I don't know.
Yeah,
it's going to be interesting. My whole thing is like people are so worried about things like inflation and the cost of goods and stuff like that, and it's like, all right, I get it, but if you want to buy American, I hope you're ready.
Yeah.
Hope you understand what the cost of buying American means.
Well,
I'm all for it. Are you?
Yeah. I mean,
understand what you're asking for.
Well, I remember, and I'll close with this story because I was reading something about this and I never really thought about it until this article brought it up. It was one of the articles I was reading as I was doing research for the show, and I don't have it pulled up, but it was talking about during the late 80s and early 90s, Walmart made this push for made in America. Made in America, made in America, made in America. Well, this was while Sam Walton was still alive. And he was pushing for, American-made goods. I still remember the brand of clothing they had. It was called Faded Glory. And
yeah.
You remember Faded Glory?
I think they still have Faded Glory products.
It's 100% made in America. But it's the crappiest quality stuff you can buy.
Anything I've ever had Faded Glory is fucking terrible.
Yeah. So, but you can't, and so I think
that's a good point too. Just because it's made in America doesn't mean it's something great.
Right, and so when Walmart started going with, okay, here's the bottom line, we're going to go with what we need to raise our bottom line. So, you're going to have all these, everything and anything coming into Walmart from wherever. So if we, and again, Walmart's one of those corporations that, they try to keep prices low, but it's not going to be pretty. So I'm already, I'm already trying to find different side hustles for this Christmas to get, more cash.
Speaking of Walmart, I don't know if they got it out by you, but man, Spark, not bad.
What's that?
It's like Walmart's delivery apps. Like people order Walmart and you just like deliver their Walmart goods and stuff. Online orders. Like it's like Amazon Flex, but for Walmart.
Really?
And they also do Home Depot, a couple other stores are on that program, but it's pretty decent. My father-in-law does it. It's pretty good.
Okay.
So,
well,
your side hustle.
We want to thank Travis for being here with us tonight. Man, it was good having you on. We hope that the family continues to do well, and you do well, and hopefully, maybe one day we'll get you back down in this neck of the woods. So. But anyway, thank you.
It's good to be back on, and I'll hop on again sometime.
Yeah, definitely. So, thank you to all who joined us. Hopefully, Sean will be back with us next week. Again, put his family in your thoughts and prayers, and we will see you all again next week. See you.
Thanks for listening to the Voice of Reason podcast. Check out our previous shows and clips on Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok.